Welcome. I'm Nick Edgar.
And I'm Jess Frost.
And we are the co-founders of the 3E Space. This is our podcast. Have you got space for this?
An unscripted and unplanned podcast dedicated to curious, messy, and imperfect conversations about the human experience.
Each week we will pick a topic at random that you, the audience, has said, I'd love to see Jess and Nick explore this topic. So without further ado, grab yourself a cuppa, let's explore, get energised and feel empowered together.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Okay, so let's close down our eyes. And let's take some deep breaths. Breathing deep into the base of our spine first. Belly, chest. And a slow exhale through the mouth. And again, in through the nose. Hold briefly at the top. And exhale with a sigh. Wiggling your toes. Slowly opening your eyes and coming back into the space. Oh, my bad. All right.
And welcome to another episode of
Have you got
space for this?
For this. A much needed breath this morning.
Yeah.
We're here again.
Emphasis on the word again.
We are, where's the wood? Touching all the wood in the hope that the tech and the audio works today. It's been a ride, hasn't it, with tech the last few weeks?
Yeah, it's just one of those things, isn't it, that I think you just have to kind of own and not to get too wound up about, but it's also one of the most easiest things to get upset and wound up about.
Yeah.
When tech isn't working.
Yeah. How are you feeling today?
I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I'm projecting. I've got a new mic angle, so I'm here for it.
Love that, mate.
How are you?
I feel like I might be a mood hoover. No, I am going to be honest and say I can tell I'm not feeling myself. I think I felt really good, actually. We came to the recorded a really good episode, didn't we, yesterday? I felt really good and went home to do a load of like creative stuff. We've got lots of workshops coming up for different spaces, and kind of editing the podcast, and then discovering for the second week in a row that the sound was off. And like, from a highly sensitive perspective, like the audio for me, and I know for you, is really important. Like, I know how jarring it can be when that's not right.
Yeah, for sure.
So there was just nothing. It was like, there's nothing we can do to edit this to make it better. And it was really fascinating / horrific to then go on the biggest ride of emotions. Like, it felt like I was on this cliff and it just went and just noticing the helplessness and the powerlessness. And I realised that what it was doing, what the podcast not working did, was it fed the narrative that I don't deserve to be heard. It's like it was silencing me. Like the time before when there was no sound, and then this one, it was like, you're not meant to have a voice. And that is so triggering and activating for my wounds.
Yeah, I know, I can imagine. And also, not having a voice is such a topic at the moment on so many different levels, isn't it?
Oh, mate, honestly, like, I could rant forever. I'm not gonna, because I think there's some real positives here. I don't think every time this happens, right, it's never really about the podcast. It's not about the tech. It's giving me an opportunity to soothe myself and help heal those wounds. So I had the biggest emotional release. And I think I'm still realizing that I'm very good at masking what I'm holding down and cracking on. And yesterday, what it gifted me was the chance to just sob my heart out. And, you know, I did tapping and my breathing, got outside, and it released something that was just bubbling away in there. So I think I needed it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fascinating. Like I feel it on, you know, as an entrepreneur, we're both entrepreneurs that, you know, work on social media. And I feel like in areas of social media right now, there is more silencing going on. I don't feel safe as a woman in an empowerment role on social media. I don't feel like I do feel like I'll be silenced. I feel like I get shadow banned. And that scares me. So it wasn't it wasn't like an anger frustration that I couldn't do the podcast. It was like an intense fear.
Yeah.
That I have no control. And that just spiraled me. So I feel the effects of that emotional release. That's what I feel today. I feel like a bit hungover, like energetically. Like I just like.
Yeah, look, I really get that. I do. And I think for me, this isn't the first time that the sound not being quite right is because of my voice. So I have to own the fact that that doesn't mean anything.
No.
But these triggers are always really interesting because what they do is they activate all of these parts of ourselves, which you've just so eloquently described in your case. And in my case, it's always, you're not good enough. There's something wrong with you. Why? And there's a victim-y part as well that goes like, why has it always happened to me?
I have that, yes.
And I have to be really careful to not become all of that.
Yeah.
And there are moments when I do. Like, to be honest, yesterday, I felt I had quite a strong day in terms of dealing with what happened. But it could so easily have been the other way around.
Yeah.
Where you dealt with it absolutely fine without all of the experiences that you've described. And I'd have absolutely become like 4 years old and cried my eyes out.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just part of riding the waves, isn't it?
Yeah. I definitely sat in that victim space, and I allow it to a certain level. I need those parts to feel heard, where it's like, why is this happening to me? Universe, what are you doing? And I'm like, the universe is just matching my frequency. But like, it is important to honour it, but like you say, not stay in it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really good illustration, really, because, you know, you kind of think, God, it was just a podcast. Come on. Like, why are you having such an intense reaction? But I think it's one of those examples of like that, the layers and layers and layers of stress and things that are kind of happening, that it just takes one thing for it to kind of, and that's what yesterday was for me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's it. That's
it.
where we are. That's where we are, team.
That's where we are.
But we recorded was potentially a fire episode yesterday on a particular topic that we pulled, and we thought we want to honour that topic today. And that topic is...
Drum roll. Courage.
Courage. Thank you, Jacob.
Absolutely. Top man. We're going to talk to courage. And my fucking God, do I need some courage right now, team? It's going to be therapeutic. Yeah, absolutely. So where should we begin today?
Today.
Because actually this will be interesting because we've recorded a whole episode. I don't want to try and recreate what happened yesterday.
No.
Do you know what I mean? And what we spoke about and where the conversation went. I think it's important because I don't want it to be contrived or to try and. I think that's important. I just want to treat this conversation on its own terms.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, then where do you want to start then, mate?
Well, let's start with the word. Let's start with courage.
What does courage actually mean?
Well, having just said what I said, that's exactly how I started yesterday.
Just roll with it. Just surrender and just...
I literally said that. And then when he said, where do you want to start? This little part just went, why don't we start where we started yesterday? I know what to do.
It's a good place to start, though.
Exactly. Well, look, and actually it was Jacob that actually told me this, but the word courage is derived from the Latin cor, meaning heart.
Mm-hmm.
The French word for heart is cœur as well, which I know from a Marillion lyric. Of course I do. J'entends ton cœur. I can hear your heart, I believe, is the lyric. So I really like that. I think courage for me is about being heart-led in action, in decision-making, in how you carry yourself. That's where I would start.
I love that, mate.
Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, I really like that, actually. And I think I was speaking to some of my courageous confidence crew, a little program that I'm running at the moment, and we were talking about
Courageous.
what?
Courageous, the word courageous.
I know. Yeah, and actually all my programs have courageous in it. Courageous healing, courageous confidence, courageous connections, because I can fit zero A in, and it was a very great word. But yeah, we were talking about courage and strength and bravery, and like I remember when I actually started my healing journey and was able to kind of have a empathy for my experience. I remember being really put off with the word resilience and strength, and I was like, finally had that awakening of like, I'm tired of being strong now. I'm tired of being a strong person, and courage feels like a different energy. Like, I think for most of my life I've thought I've been courageous, but it's actually coming from like an armor, strong, I'm gonna prove myself bravery that's felt very fear-based and lack-based. Do you know what I mean? Whereas actually the open-hearted courage, I can feel the space in me just saying it. And I think it now is the foundation of what I do with my clients, because it is one of the C's of self in terms of internal family systems.
Yes, one of the 8 C's.
Yeah, one of the 8 C's. And it has been in me all along. But there was just parts of me that were taking over that were making it more exhausting, actually. Courage feels kind and vulnerable.
Yeah, I like that.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it takes,
for sure.
It takes vulnerability to be courageous from an open-hearted space and not an armoured space. Yeah.
Yes. And actually, it's from that armoured space that probably that's how I used to understand courage.
Yeah.
That it was that digging in. It was that finding the strength within you to go the extra mile, to do what needs to be done. That stoicism, that all of those kind of traits that you see embodied in storytelling, and whether it's war or, I don't know, it's a word I used to hear a lot in football dressing rooms, you know, especially when things weren't going so well. And I think it can be that. I think it can be all of that, but it has, they said, come from that heart-led, authentic place for it to truly be courage.
Yeah.
I think it's something else if it comes from a response to fear or threat.
Yeah.
Oh no, maybe that's not the right way of saying it.
There's no right or wrong for your part.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. What I mean to say to that point is, it can be when you feel threatened and afraid and in fear that you can summon a heart-led response.
Yeah.
So to say that courage is the open-hearted courage doesn't come from that is what I was talking about, I think.
Yeah. My goodness, I think we're going to need courage over the next few years, that's for sure. Like, you're going to be doing a men's space for Encourage, which is where
Yes.
Jake is. Talk to us about that, like, and what courage means for you men.
So Encourage is a CIC, which is I've been involved with for a couple of years, and I'm really proud to be associated with and to help facilitate these weekends away this will be the 5th one. And these are for men who have a curiosity and courage to come together, to spend a weekend together, to explore themes of vulnerability, values, and vision. And what I really resonate with, encourages mission, is that it's not about the individual. That's part of it. But it's actually about how does working on yourself, how does really facing who you are as a man allow you to live a life led by courage, to be the man that you want to be for your partner.
Yeah.
For yourself, first and foremost, but for your partner, for your family, for your friends, but in your settings and in your community, and to actually lead in those environments. And that doesn't mean having a position of leadership. It just means that it means taking a stand, I think, for what you believe in and how you want to be as a man. It means not allowing toxic cultures to remain and to feel supported in challenging that.
Yeah.
So, and again, that doesn't have to be big things. It might just be a glib comment in the pub. It might be that in a sports dressing room or at work, you know. And I think men traditionally, it might be in a WhatsApp group, but I think there is a historic culture, and I've been in these cultures in all of those settings that I've just described, where the culture that's allowed to be dominant is toxic.
Yeah.
Not all the time, not from everyone. And actually, it's usually just a very small amount of men that claim that power to behave in those ways. And because it's unchallenged, that gives the impetus for it to become embedded.
Yeah.
And I think when a culture becomes embedded, whether it's in a relationship or a friendship group or at work or whatever, it's very hard to create change, especially as an individual. And I think there's a lot of men, and I would include myself in this, that stay silent and swallow down the pain of having to endure connections with other men who embody these traits. And by definition, you are, what's the word I'm looking for? Your silence allows it to continue.
Yeah. And the shame that then we hold in for being silent. And...
For sure. And actually, when I think about my own experiences as a man, very often, in order to survive in some of these groups, I would people please and actually befriend these men and act like them to stay safe. Yeah. That's the uncomfortable truth about it. And I think a big part of my journey has been undoing that and starting to feel confident to challenge that. And now it's just something I don't and won't tolerate.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that every time I see it, I'm going to challenge it wherever I am, because I don't. I think to say that would be false. But I have to continue to summon the courage to challenge it whenever I see it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the weekend, I think, is about bringing men together to, because a lot of the men that I've worked with and got to know have always felt quite alone in their experience around other men. There's that kind of caginess of, am I the only one thinking this?
Yeah.
So you internalize those feelings. So I think it offers an opportunity to normalize a lot of what isn't necessarily normalized in other areas of their life.
Yeah.
And spending time with other men and recognizing actually this is normal. A lot of what I've just spoken about is quite normal. It offers hope, I think, for possibilities of change. And that's the vision part of it. The final part of the weekend is about how can I begin to have an impact? And what am I going to commit to doing? Which is really important, because I think there are a lot of, and this isn't just men's work and men's spaces, there's a lot of wellness retreats, things like that, where you can go away and have a great experience, but then nothing changes when you go back to your life. You might get like a short-term bump because,
Of course.
do you know what I mean? But and that's why I think there's a real grittiness in an open-hearted way, a real kind of, yeah, it's just real. I think it's trying to tackle. Ultimately, I think, you know, if 3 times as many men are choosing to end their life as women do, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what I've just spoken about can be a big part of that. So, yeah.
Oh my God.
I'm very passionate about it.
I'm so glad you're involved with them and you're doing that such important work. And I think for, you know, I definitely find that vulnerability of being in a group of women still challenging, you know, from a mother wound perspective. And I think, you know, men are always going to have that, their own version of that, of like what vulnerability looks like, especially when you're going to meet a group of strangers potentially.
Yeah.
And yeah, when you were talking about like finding safety in toxic cultures, like one thing I've really noticed is just how unsafe I feel when you notice something. I think it's probably linked to my trauma as well, but when you notice something, you're like, hold on, something is not right, and no one is doing a fucking thing.
Yeah.
So it is like my childhood trauma playing out in like social situations. But yeah, how unsafe I feel with everyone else's silence. And I even said to you, didn't I, yesterday, like when we were driving, I was like, we both said, like, with everything that's going on in the world, and for me, I'm going to speak for myself, and you know, part of me is like, you can't get political, you can't talk about this stuff. It's fucking gone way beyond politics for me, right? It's basic human rights and needs, in my opinion. And there's this little part of me going, yeah, but who's leading the opposition? Like, who's fighting this? And it's that same scared little me that's going, sorry, where's the adults? Like, where's the adults that are going to step up and sort this out?
Yeah.
It's that real fear of like a car crash, like literally imminent. And everyone's just like, doo, doo, doo.
No,
It scares the shit out of me.
It is. But, and I think this is, if we're talking about courage in this context, it certainly on a world stage, it requires people to challenge and have those voices heard. And that's maybe the difficult thing at the moment. That my reaction to a lot of what I hear when I see some of the rhetoric and the language being used by the likes of Trump and Musk et al. It's so blindingly obvious to me how oppressive and damaging, in my opinion, this is, and where this could be heading, a place that the world has been to before.
Yeah.
It's frightening, and it's the how to tackle it, how to bring courage into that, I think is a really interesting thing to explore.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I don't think you can fight it on its own terms. Like, I don't think you can fight fire with fire and hate with hate. I think you have to offer something which is more appealing, more hopeful. And I think for me, we're still only 5 years from a global pandemic. And I think for me, if you think about the 5 years leading into the pandemic, where you had the Brexit election and before that, the financial crisis, and I just feel that fear has grown to such levels that I hoped that the pandemic would be what one of the opportunities of that experience that we all shared would be a more courageous, open-hearted, connecting. Our values might really come to the surface and recognize how precious life really is.
Yeah.
But it feels like those with power, they've taken the fear of the pandemic and used that fear to want to have more control in order to feel safe.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
It's greed, it's addiction,
And I think any culture that's built on fear requires fear to survive.
Of course it does.
So I think it's about questioning what you're being told without doubting absolutely everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's, as an individual, what's my responsibility? What can I do? I think it is about saying, like, how do I really feel about this? Because a lot of this stuff is very carefully constructed to create that activation response in you.
Yeah.
And to react and to say, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Without really thinking what's behind the messaging. Why am I being presented this as an issue that needs tackling?
Mm-hmm.
And is it really true?
Yeah, that's it. And like this leadership style that we're seeing, it's designed to dysregulate. Exactly what I talked about in the addiction episode. It's designed to play on that disconnection from self and disconnection from power. And when we are in our fear response, like especially if it activates younger parts of us, it's when we're more likely to feel powerless and helpless, like a little child would. And where our power lies is in the regulation and in the realization that we have choice.
Yeah, I think so.
We have choice. And even when we feel we are powerless as an individual, we hold so much power. And it does take that courage to speak, even if you're, like you say, calling out something in your local community, or even if you find the courage to share something out loud, whether it's on, your platform of choice. But it really is why the other day I was just like screaming like, the time is now, team. The time is now to realize your power, find your voice.
Yes.
To advocate for your needs, your future, and what you want this world to look like. We can all say we're really passionate about saving the world and stuff, but it requires that inner strength, but it's courage, isn't it? It requires that inner wisdom, that connection back to self, that clarity, all of the C's, to be able to respond, not react, like you say, like for like, but respond in a way that is self-led.
Yeah, for sure. But that I think that's the challenge that all of us face in our lives, both in terms of the relationships that we have, how we're showing up in the world, and what our views are and what we value and what kind of society we want to create.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And I think for me, all of the stuff that is in the headlines of the news, or a lot of the stuff, are problems which almost don't have a solution. And I think it's very soundbitey, and it's very kind of, if I think about, what does putting our walls up, becoming independent, I mean, what's the phrase that I've heard the most in this country over the last 10 years, it's about put the great back into Great Britain. What does that mean, for example?
Yeah.
Bring back this greatness. And I'm like, what? So when we're talking about greatness in the context of Britain, we're really talking about colonialism. We're really talking about oppression. We're talking about our own history of going around the world and saying, I'm going to rip your culture to shreds and I'm going to embed our culture in how you do things. And we still live in that.
I know.
In the legacy of all of that.
I know.
We really do.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to go off on one now. I think it's really, for me, as a white British male, for me to have an opinion, I can't understand how any white British male can have a problem with immigration or a multicultural society because we created it.
I know. Mm-hmm.
It's one of the most insane things for me to get my head around. And I think this is part of you just saw then that visceral reaction within me. It's like the truth is so blindingly obvious for me that all of this other stuff, it just gets in the way of it.
Yeah. I know.
It does.
But it's that is the nature of that manipulation and abuse and power, because it's like word salads, you just get confused, you get discombobulated.
You do.
You lose the clarity. And this all does link to what we've talked about highly sensitive, like self-care. Like, this is the time to really get in your body. Like, one of my clients in America that I support, who, you know, is deeply, deeply affected by what's going on. You know, he described it as like he can't look at the light for too long, the light being the horrendous.
Yes.
And how it's good to have like one eye on it, and you are keeping yourself informed, and, you know, you're nourishing yourself with the right information, following the right accounts that I think We Can Do Hard Things, Leonard Doyle, I think they've I can't remember the term they've used, but they've created a podcast that kind of feeds you what you need to know in a really positive way. So like, not look at that light too long, have one eye on it.
Yes.
But really look after your fucking self. Like, whether it is ramping up your therapy and coaching, whether it is, you know, really doing the nervous system care, you know, the somatics, the breathing, the movement, the getting in here. Like, we can't be open-hearted from here. And I think we are so taught to stay here, but we need to be in here, looking after ourselves, honouring the days where it does feel like yesterday, just like too much.
Yeah. Like,
it's still just, what's the fucking point kind of day? But that will pass. We regroup, we reset, and surround yourself with people that can give you the hope, but also walk with you in courage. Feel lit up now. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Who's with me?
And also recognise, because alongside everything we've just said in terms of that, and it can almost feel like an echo chamber of this is all there is, and it isn't.
Yeah.
It's look for the helpers at every level. Look for the people that are bucking that trend. Like, create connections with them.
Yeah.
Spend time in those spaces. Allow your cup to fill together.
Yeah.
And build that courage together.
Yeah.
It's not all on you as an individual. I think that's really important.
No, find your community.
But you're right, in as much as this is a time to double down on self-care, to think about what are my patterns that I'm repeating that I need support with in order to be able to move through my life in a different way, a more aligned way.
Yeah. What are my values? Like, have I ever even unpicked my own values? Like, what do I think about everything going on in the world? Like, what?
Well, this is one of the things which, you know, I mentioned on the weekend. When we look at values, it can be quite confronting.
Yeah.
And there have been some experiences like that where men look at values and think, I'm not quite sure what I value. And that's really kind of like, that's a real hard truth to face.
Yeah. It's very common.
It is very common. It's very, very common.
It's that groupthink. Like, if I think about, you know, again, I'm going to speak from my lived experience, and for those people I support in addicted families where it's enmeshed. You've got groupthink happening where no one has that self-advocacy to have a difference of opinion or have healthy conflict, or everyone has the same likes, everyone has the same dislikes. And you don't realise in that environment that there's a choice again, and it's deliberate to keep the dysfunction happening, right? So it's every single one of us has this innate power within. And we just have to find the courage, whether that is walking into a therapy office, like hiring your first coach to help you, do that excavation back to self. But I think, if I think about like my most courageous moments, it is those courageous moments where I was vulnerable enough to go, I need some support. Like, I am fucking lost.
Yeah.
And like courage when I think about vulnerability, which was like something I'd be like, stay over there. Being able to find communities where I can be crying and not okay, and for people to witness me do that. I mean, what would you say are your most courageous moments?
So definitely, I think asking for help.
Yeah.
Recognizing that I could no longer, that my life was falling apart, really.
Yeah.
It had fallen apart. And to actively seek out therapeutic help, I think was incredibly courageous as I look back now. But actually, one of the things that came out of that was an exploration into self-expression, first via journaling, which then became kind of an exploration of music. And I uncovered a gift.
Yeah.
And actually, I think for me, it was also really courageous to create music and songs which were about my personal experience, and to put myself out there on stage and sing my truth.
Yeah.
I'm really proud that I did that. But often also courageous acts for me have been about recognizing when you haven't acted courageously and to take responsibility for things that you recognize you could have done better. There's plenty of examples of that for me. The example of when I was a football manager definitely comes to mind there. When I'm not going to go through the whole story, but
the story needs to be on the podcast at some point.
Yeah, it does. But that was definitely a case of reactivity of like just ranting a message to someone and pressing send and just causing chaos. Like that's like,
my bum hurts for you.
Yeah, I know. We'll talk about that at some stage.
Regret. There'll be one on regret.
Up, we'll talk about that. But also, I think doing what I'm doing now is courageous. I think anybody who is going into a heart-led venture, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be anything to do with wellness. But I think anybody that does that is one of the most courageous things you can do, because you will have to face yourself.
Yeah, anyone following your soul's purpose.
You will have to face yourself. You will have to deal with all of your shadow, all of your darkness, all of your fear, all of your anxieties, all of your doubt, and find a way to move through that. Because I don't think, unless you're the luckiest entrepreneur, like I don't think anybody truly is a success overnight.
No.
I don't believe that.
No.
I think you have to fail. I think you have to get it wrong. I think you have to learn. If you have to, and that's what's so incredible about it. I think that when you lean into that, amazing things can happen.
Yeah.
So courageous moments. Yeah.
I think like just for me as well, like just anyone recognizing there's something not quite right here, whether it is they've grown up in dysfunctional environments and that dysfunction's starting to play out and they're starting to notice patterns and they're thinking, no, I want to break this cycle for my family or for just generally future generations. Like, yeah. And having those difficult conversations, you know, I think I need to celebrate that for myself. You know, someone did reflect that back to me this week about the courage to share my story when it might not land well, and it definitely fucking won't land well with certain people. And the conflict arising from finally finding my voice and challenging things, not always in a very good way. You know, I'm still learning how to kind of rupture and repair, I guess. So, but I think having the courage to say no and stop things and say, this doesn't work for me anymore. Like, this isn't happening. I'm not going to put up with that anymore. Yeah. I want to celebrate that, because I know a lot of people listening to this are on their own version of that hero's journey of just, you know, coming back to themselves. But it's not just about coming back to yourself and everything feels fucking great. It's like, suddenly I've got this voice and I'm going to have to use it, right? And it's not going to land with the people that have known me in a more conditioned sense.
For sure.
And having to sit with the discomfort of that.
Oh, yeah, for me, that list is long and distinguished. Like, I'm definitely the villain in certain people's eyes.
Yeah.
And that's, I've had to learn that's okay. And that takes courage.
Make peace with it, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
You know, and we you know, I'm sure we'll talk about, you know, that again, that regret and that amends almost process, because yeah, a lot of it is sitting with yourself with no control over what someone else is thinking, feeling, behaving, saying, and just having to be at peace. All of it's courageous.
Yeah, and I think I've found that really difficult. I think I have found that difficult. I've found, especially the more recent examples of that, like where connections have been made and relationships built, and then it started to not feel quite right.
Yeah.
And how I've dealt with that hasn't always been great. But I have acted upon it.
Yes.
In the best way I could in that moment, or even if it wasn't the best way I could in that moment, it's the fact I've acted upon it. And I think as a recovering people pleaser,
yeah,
for me to act upon my intuition, if something's not feeling right, I don't quite feel safe anymore. The potential of a connection and a friendship or whatever it might be, a work collaboration, it's no longer feeling aligned. It's not feeling right. And I'm going to take action.
Yeah.
And for someone who's 50 years old, when really it's only in the last few years that I've addressed, even understood, and then begun to address my people pleasing, I have to be compassionate about the messiness of the taking action, because even taking any kind of courageous action, actually, as a recovering people pleaser, is really uncomfortable and really scary.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's so many layers to what courage is.
Hard relate to that. I talk to people all the time about like the kind of all or nothing step you have to take first of all when you start to break free from codependency and people pleasing. It's like sometimes we go black and white and it's like, right, no, I'm going to do this and it's going to go really cold. It's going to be really cold and it's going to be really blunt. But that is the only way I'm going to get to do this action. But maybe in 5 years' time, that would look differently, where you sit that person down and you have a courageous conversation and you cut ties in another way. But yeah, sometimes that's what it takes. And we have to show compassion for that.
Yeah, exactly.
And sit with the discomfort of how that might land.
Absolutely. And I think all of us face these kind of things every day, these challenge to courage.
Yeah.
Look, we're doing a podcast where we're not like experts on anything we've spoken about today, but I do believe we have expertise to offer. We certainly have our own lived experience to offer and can stand in our power with that.
And that for me, like, and this is my opinion, I think lived experience, someone said this on a post the other day, like lived experience is far more important than a niche.
Yeah.
Right? Being an expert. I am here for the lived experience.
Yes.
And I want to like say, no, that is where like the power does lie for me. It's like just hearing stories, story sharing.
Yes.
That's what I'm here for in this world.
Exactly.
Empowering story sharing, and it can be vulnerable, it can be dark, it can be light, like it can be all of it. I think sharing your story and your lived experience has more power and more healing power than we give it credit for. And I'd rather listen to someone messily share their lived experience than someone professing to be an expert telling me what to do. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
So I'm proud of us.
Me
Proud
too.
of us for the courage of doing this podcast, of using our voice.
Yeah, for
even
sure.
when our voice shakes and our audio's shit.
Exactly. But that's the thing that, but you nevertheless have to face the discomfort of, like, even in some of what we've discussed today, there's a part of me happening right now where I'm thinking, oh, some of what I've said, like, is that okay? And that you have that self kind of like, this is the thing about courage. When you lean into speaking your truth, you have other parts of you that feel a little bit unsafe by doing that, because it invites opposition, it invites difference of opinion, it invites challenge, it invites someone saying, actually, that's a load of bullshit. And I think one of the things that makes courage even more difficult today, and maybe why on a global scale things are happening the way they are, there's so many things I want to say right now. The art of disagreement and debate and being able to respect a difference of opinion has really kind of, I feel that's a lost art at so many different levels.
Yeah.
And that's something really important here, because when we're allowed to say what we think and what we feel, and even if somebody that we are sharing that with, or even a whole group that we're sharing that with, if they accept that and challenge in a way that's respectful, and not like an arm wrestle where there can only be one winner, and one person that's right, leaning into that courage becomes much more possible.
Exactly.
But when we're self-editing all the time, when we're worried about stepping into
censoring,
and I struggle with this sometimes, especially when it comes to social media content or what I put out there, including this podcast. Like, I'm happy to admit that, because I think it's part of my journey to courage is being able to remind myself that it's okay if people don't agree with me. It's okay if somebody that I'm connected with on Instagram reads a caption or sees a post that I do and goes, oh, I don't like that, and they decide to unfollow. Like, that's been a big journey for me. And it's also okay for me to do the same. And I think this is really important, and it doesn't get talked about when you're smiling.
I love it. Like, I love it. I know how much that self-editing and censoring can take over for you, and I'm just so fucking proud of you. And this is the thing, right? I wish I could remember the exact quote, but Florence Given, she did I think like a Substack blog yesterday, and she literally put like the result of finding your voice and speaking your truth is disagreement.
Yeah,
and I think
100%.
when it wasn't, I'm paraphrasing really terribly, it was way more succinct and powerful, because I was like, get in, Florence. But when you have that part go, I think that's a fucking great sign that you're not being vanilla.
Yes.
Like, you're going to have those parts that go, oh shit, we're going to get cancelled. And it's standing in that power of what you're doing is you are passionately sharing your truth. You're not telling other people to think that way.
Yes.
That's the difference.
Yes.
And that's why we can have healthy debate, and we can get an open mind and open hearted and be like, no, tell me about your perspective. I'm really interested to hear about it. But it's that whole, we are right, ego driven. This is what you need to believe. This is the truth. No, this is my truth.
Yeah.
And I've always just wanted your flavour. Your flavour, not vanilla. Your flavour.
My flavour.
So I'm grateful to hear your truth.
Yeah,
it's so
right
important,
back at
and
you.
it's so courageous.
As is everybody else's. Like, it's all valid. And again, I think this is something which, in the context of being courageous in our lives and in who we are, like you said, it's sitting with the possibility that disagreement and conflict will be created, and normalizing that's okay. But when you're then in it, to not revert to trying to coerce and manipulate
People
or
please,
persuade,
yeah.
or to abandon yourself
Exactly.
and
Appease
and almost take back and undo the courage.
I do.
And again, that's a very tempting urge.
Yes.
Because it these are all parts of ourselves which are designed to try and like find comfort and find safety in the best way they can.
Yeah.
So a big part of what I love to hear when I'm working with people and they say to me, I was able to like talk to myself. I was able to connect with myself. I was able to sit with the discomfort of doing the thing.
Yeah.
It's massive. And to be celebrated every single time.
Yeah.
Because it's breaking that conditioning.
It is.
And I think, and I don't know, once you've had that experience of moving through it, it's never quite as frightening again, even if you have to relearn the lessons, even if you have to, and even if there are then times that you don't take up that challenge and courage fails you in that moment, you can always find it again.
That's it. It's always there. That's the element of self where this C is. It's like, it's always in there, but sometimes it gets covered with these conditioned parts of us. And that's where, taking a breath, coming back into the body, like allowing that nurturing energy to put an arm around those little parts that are like, we're going to say the wrong thing, like we're going to upset someone. I had to do it with last week's episode, about children of alcoholic.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, oh, who's going to hear that? Like, am I going to offend someone? Am I going to upset someone? And it's why the tools that I have in the box, like where I'm literally like tapping, like, you're safe, Jess, you're safe to speak your truth. You're not responsible for their reaction to your truth. And like, I have to reaffirm. But I think recognizing, maybe this is a nice way to end it, but like recognizing the body signals of when we're encouraged.
Yes.
And when we're not encouraged can be really helpful. Like if I think about when I'm operating from my like trauma, wounds, my armor, my fear, my lack, I'm like very constricted. My Shelby, my tough girl who wants to fight, she's in my jaw and my jaw's locked, and like I've got tension headaches and my shoulders are hunched and I've got this weight on here. Like, but when I think about courage, I can even just take a breath thinking about it, that open-hearted, spacious. And then, like you just did there, you might say your truth and then these parts come in and you go constricted again. And then you're like, oh, no, take a breath. It's okay. But I think being able to recognize how it shows up for us somatically can be really helpful to be like, actually, no, I'm not in self. I'm going to go into this conflict or whatever from a place of fight, fear, lack, and actually maybe I need to come home to myself before I go in. So I'm coming with courage.
Yes, so that you can embody both softness in your strength, but also strength in your softness. Yeah.
And it's why space is so important for me. I think we forget as well, when we think we haven't got a choice, we forget that we can create space for ourselves to come home to ourselves, even if that's like we had to do before the podcast.
Yes.
Like, oh, let's just take a breath before we go live, because or else it could be coming just from dysregulated parts. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Give yourself a bit of space. Let's have a bit of space.
Absolutely.
Come home to ourselves, go again. Come home to ourselves, go again.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've loved this chat.
Yeah, me too.
Fingers crossed for the
for the audio.
Can't even bear it.
Please, the gods of audio.
Take a breath. Epic. Big love. Proud of you, man. Proud of you.
Proud of you.
We'll see you soon. Big love. Thank you so much for listening or watching this week's episode of Have You Got Space for This? If you're liking what you're hearing and seeing, please subscribe, rate, or review the podcast so we can reach as many people around the world.
And if you're not already connected with us and are aware of everything we do at the 3E space, in the show notes you will see all of our handles and ways to get in touch with us, which we'd really love you to do. Get connected with us, give us your feedback on this and any other episodes you listen to, and also topics. Keep giving us topics and stay connected. So until next time, thanks for being here.